House vote yesterday on this tax reform bill, and then it turns out it didn't count. I don't know what the game was. And then it went to you guys. You voted on it late last night, and you had people on the left yelling and screaming and lying about what it did and didn't do. And then it went back to the House today, and it's now passed. And this is going to become a reality for the American people. In general, tell me, is it euphoric? How do you feel about this?
It was a terrific victory. I just came back a few minutes ago from the White House, being with the president and all of us coming together, celebrating the passage of what really is an historic tax cut. This bill is going to make a profound difference all across Texas and all across the country. It cuts taxes on small businesses, on farmers, on ranchers, on job creators. It makes American businesses competitive on the world stage to bring jobs back to America, to bring manufacturing jobs back to America. And it cuts tax rates in every income bracket for Americans all across this country. It doubles the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000 per child per year. And this is designed to create jobs, to raise wages, to expand opportunity and growth, and that's good for Texans all across our state and Americans all across our nation. It's
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of the great state of Texas. And Ted, in watching what the other side was saying, Steny Hoyer said it's the worst bill ever in the history of the world. Nancy Pelosi said people will basically die. How hard is it for a guy like you who is for this, and I believe, therefore, for the American people, to not say to like a Nancy Pelosi, why don't we pass the bill to see what's in the bill? I mean, is there a moment when you want to almost throw back at them what they were saying about the ACA, which was a horrendous bill?
Well, it's even worse than that, because they know what's in it, and they're just lying about it. It is sad what has happened to the Democrats in Congress, which is that they're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah. They hate the president so badly, and they're listening to the radical left of their base that is demanding resist, oppose, fight. That congressional Democrats are voting no on everything. They're filibustering everything. They're opposing virtually every nomination. You look at in the past, tax reform and tax cuts have traditionally been bipartisan. There have been Democrats willing to vote to cut taxes. When right. Ronald Reagan cut taxes in 1981 and 1986, Tip O'Neill, a Democrat, was Speaker of the House. In the House, the Reagan tax cuts were carried by then a conservative Democrat named Phil Gramm from Texas. In the Senate, one of the leading proponents was a liberal Democrat from New Jersey, Bill Bradley. With this tax cut in the House of Representatives, you know how many Democrats voted for it? 0. In the Senate, you know how many Democrats voted for it? 0. Every Democrat, they're so radical that the only thing they can do is oppose and resist. And Pags, the frustrating thing is they're saying things to the American people that are objectively false, and they know are false. So the Democrats are saying, and I listened to them on the Senate floor just go on and on and on, saying this is going to raise people's taxes. Well, I'm reminded of in the Old Testament, there was a test for someone who came forward and said he was a prophet, which is that the people were to demand to give us a short-term prophecy, and let's see if it comes true or not.
Yeah.
In February, just a little over a month away, everyone who's listening to this show, take a look at your pay stub. February is when they'll adjust the pay stubs. The tax cut will go into effect in January. It'll be your February pay stubs. And just compare it to a year ago. And you're going to see across the country, the overwhelming majority of Americans are going to see a tax cut, and for most, a really significant tax cut.
When you ran for president, it's Senator Ted Cruz. You wanted a tax code where we could fill out our taxes at the end of the year on a postcard. It
yes.
looks like, I think the number is 89% of Americans should have that available to them now. Huge win, Ted. I mean, we hate tax day.
Well, that's exactly right, and I'll tell you, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, who's a Texan, drew that portion of this tax plan directly from the plan that I campaigned on in the presidential race, and what really drives that is doubling the standard deduction, so that now for a married couple, the standard deduction goes from $12,000 to $24,000, which means first $24,000 of income you earn, you pay zero, nothing, nada.
Right.
And that dramatically simplifies filling out your taxes. So as you noted, roughly 90% of taxpayers now will be able to fill it out on a postcard. That is a major simplification, and it ends up resulting in a lot less time and annoyance and pain in the neck for taxpayers across Texas and across the country.
It's Senator Ted Cruz, Republican, great state of Texas. Ted, let's just go down the list here. The Democrats say that the vast majority of the money, the tax money that's being saved or is being pilfered from the government, is going to go to the rich. True or not?
Not true, but here's how the Democrats say that, because they define rich as anyone who pays taxes.
Oh, well,
that's their definition. If you are a taxpayer, you are rich. And so therefore they get mad that when you cut taxes, the people whose taxes are being cut are the people who are actually paying taxes.
This is going to add $1 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. True or not?
Completely false. That's based on what's called a static score, which is a score that ignores the impact on the economy of tax cuts. Every time we've cut taxes, we've seen the economy boom. If you look at it, Ronald Reagan came in, cut taxes, the economy took off. Before Reagan, John F. Kennedy came in, cut taxes, the economy took off. And in fact, in both of those instances, the results of cutting taxes were that federal tax revenues increased. That's what I think we're going to see here is economic growth, more jobs, more opportunity, especially for young people. Look, if you're a young person right now, you're coming out of school, you got student loans, don't know what the future holds. For the last 8 years in the Obama economy, when you came out of school, it was next to impossible to find a job. The objective of this tax cut is to expand the number of jobs, to make American businesses more competitive, to have small businesses grow and expand, and that's good for the economy. I believe it is going to grow the economy and help us turn around and start paying down the deficit and the debt.
We're appealing the individual mandate. That mandate, I think 80% was the number, was harming and affecting and taxing the middle class. But the left will say repealing that now means that our health system won't have enough money, it'll go broke. Is that true?
It's completely not true, and I will say that's one of really, I think, the biggest victories in this tax cut. This is a fight that I led the charge on, and a couple of months ago began urging, as a part of tax reform, let's repeal the Obamacare individual mandate. When I began urging this, there were only a handful of senators backing me up. We maybe had a half dozen, and most of my colleagues were leery of including this in tax reform. And we made the case both privately within the conference, but also publicly, and convinced my colleagues, and we unified 51 Republicans. We repealed the individual mandate. Now, what does that mean? The individual mandate is every year the IRS fines about 6.5 million Americans because they can't afford health insurance. About 1 million of those people are in Texas. It's incredibly unfair. Roughly 80% of the people fined by the IRS are earning $50,000 a year or less.
Stunning.
Roughly 40% are earning $25,000 a year or less. So if you're a single mom living in San Antonio and you're struggling, you're working your fingers to the bone, you're trying to provide for your kids, you're making less than $25,000 a year, you can't afford health insurance because premiums have skyrocketed under Obamacare, and the IRS, to add insult to injury, comes along and fines you because you can't afford it. It's one of the things that led Bill Clinton to describe Obamacare as the craziest thing in the world. Well, we end that. The IRS fines for 6.5 million people. We're providing real meaningful tax relief because the IRS is going to stop fining them. And not only that, that ends up saving the federal government over $300 billion, which we pour directly into lowering rates every bracket, lowering the rates and doubling the child tax credit. So for that single mom, if you got 3 kids, right now the tax credit is $1,000 per kid per year. That doubles to $2,000 per kid per year. That's $6,000 in real relief. That makes a difference in families who are struggling.
It's Senator Ted Cruz. Ted, did you see what AT&T did already today? I don't know if you noticed this.
I did. They made a powerful announcement of $1 billion of investment in new infrastructure. Not only that, they announced that they're giving a bonus to 200,000 employees. Every one of their employees, $1,000 each. That's just. I expect that we will see a great many of these announcements.
Well, that was the question. Is this unique, or is this something that many corporations are going to do? And by the way, if you go to the website, on the AT&T.com website, they will say, because of this bill and this law, we are able to do this. They completely give you guys credit.
That's exactly right. And, right now, the corporate tax rate in America is 35%. It is the highest in the developed world. We have a higher tax rate than virtually all of Europe. We have a higher tax rate than England, a higher tax rate than France, a higher tax rate than Germany. Ireland is 12.5%.
Wow.
Ours is 35%. Ireland is 12.5%. And what we've seen during 8 years of Obama is U.S. companies fleeing America, taking jobs overseas, hurting American workers. This tax bill cuts our corporate tax rate from 35%, higher than all of our competitors, down to 21%. That's designed to bring trillions of dollars of capital back to the U.S., to bring jobs back to the U.S., to bring manufacturing jobs, steel jobs, heavy manufacturing. That's good for the economy, bringing jobs back. And you're seeing that with AT&T's announcement. Boeing made an announcement today, and you're going to see a lot more companies being able to invest their capital in jobs and raising wages rather than just sending it to the federal government or taking jobs overseas.
And that blows a left-wing lie out of the water. They said corporations will just hoard the money or something. Well, one last thing before I let you go. Really appreciate you. New York and well, just say New York and California, but there are other high-tax states as well. We've got listeners. We've got viewers there. They're all concerned because they say their taxes are going up. My answer, and my answer doesn't matter. Your answer will be more important, but my answer is your states are screwing you when it comes to the tax code. They need to stop taxing you so much. But their complaint is that this somehow hurts them. They can no longer deduct what's being called SALT, state and local taxes. Talk to me about that.
Well, listen, that is a real concern about this bill, and it's been something that I've been fighting to address throughout this entire process. The first version of the bill that was considered in the House, I think, was quite strong, but its biggest weakness was that there were a number of voters and a number of taxpayers, particularly those in high-tax blue states like New York and New Jersey and California, whose taxes would go up. And the reason is that this eliminates the deduction for state and local taxes. And in those really high tax states where the local politicians are just slamming the citizens, that ended up for the higher income taxpayers raising their taxes. I spoke out vigorously against it. I think as Republicans, we ought to be cutting taxes for everybody. Every taxpayer ought to get a tax cut. I argued vigorously for that. Now look, I recognize there's some irony in that I'm not typically viewed as defending New York values. And yet I've been fighting hard for the New Yorkers and Californians and folks in New Jersey. And several things happened to improve this significantly. Number one, we adopted an amendment that I strongly supported, allowing every taxpayer to deduct up to $10,000 in state and local taxes, either property taxes or income taxes. That mitigates a lot of the harm. It doesn't eliminate it, but it takes a lot of the people who might have had a tax increase and it brings them back into the area of a tax cut. Secondly, in the conference committee, we were able to lower rates even further, lower the rates across the board, lower the middle class rates, but also lower the top rate from 39.6 to 37. That's a meaningful cut, and what it does is it takes a lot more of the people who might have had a tax increase and it puts them in the situation of having a tax cut. There are still a limited number of taxpayers, typically very high-income taxpayers in high-tax states, who may have a tax increase. I disagree with that. I wish that were not in this bill, but I think we improve this problem substantially. And I do think the reason they've got a higher tax bill is because their state and local politicians are taxing the living daylights.
And that's really, the ball is in their court. They can change that and help out their local taxpayers themselves. Ted?
Well, and I'm going to make a prediction, Pags, that we're going to see an awful lot of New Yorkers and Californians jumping in U-Hauls and heading to states like Texas and Florida that don't have state income tax.
Well, as long as they leave their politics behind, I'm fine with that.
Now, I agree with that. If you're going to come to Texas, don't vote like a California Democrat. If you want California Democrat policies, stay there, but don't mess up what we got.
100%. Ted Cruz, Republican, the great state of Texas. Ted, always an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Pags, thank you. Let me quickly make one other point, if I've got a second. One of the biggest victories in this tax bill is an amendment that I introduced concerning education, and it takes college 529 savings plans, which lets you save for college in a tax-advantaged way, and it expands it so now parents and grandparents can save not just for college, but can save for K through 12 education, can save for public school, private school, parochial school, religious schools, up to $10,000 a year per child. That amendment that I introduced, it was the only amendment adopted on the floor of the Senate that was added to this bill. It passed 50-50, perfectly divided. The vice president came down and broke the tie. It is in the bill. It is the single most significant federal school choice legislation ever passed, and it can make a meaningful difference in 50 million school children across the country, because now parents and grandparents can save for those kids in a tax-advantaged way for K through 12 education, and it's incredibly meaningful. It was a major victory for the state of Texas and for people all across the country.
Sure is. Ted, we appreciate you. Thanks a lot for coming on. We're back after this in the Joe Pags Show.